Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Unfuckwithable. I am here with a very special guest today. His name is Don Gauvreau, and he is from Canada, and he is here to help educate you guys all about psychedelics. So, Don, I've known Don for a very long time, and I've seen what he's done in the industry in Canada, being that I am from Canada myself. And he's actually recognized one of the best researchers and product formulators in the industry up in Canada, and he's known as the Supplement Godfather for good reason. And he was nominated in 2012 as one of the top 40 under 40 for the Vancouver Business Magazine. And Don's academic background as well, you guys, he includes a Master's of Science degree and a Bachelor's degree in Kinesiology. He also holds the designation of Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and he's earned the distinction of CBD Professional from the CBD Training Academy. And of course, obviously, he's got tons of articles published in Up in Canada, Inside Fitness Magazine, Muscle Insider, tons more that I probably can't even name. But his history, 2008, he started, co-founded Pharma Freak, which I had the pleasure of working with them back in the day. And then 2011, they founded LBRX Sciences, and 2014 Saga Sciences. And then now, though, Don's passion project, which brings us now to psychedelics, is that in 2018 he actually sold part of his stake to free up more time to dive into his passion project, which is researching and developing in this whole alternative medicine industry that is starting to really explode now. So, Don, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I forgot about some of those things over the years.
Yeah,
now that I'm so focused on all this new and exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm so excited to be here and chat with you about all this stuff.
Yeah, I am as well. So what made you decide to just up and do that? Because it would seem that you were obviously at your peak in this area in the sports supplement industry, and all of a sudden to go into this new uncharted territory that's hasn't even really started to really get its legs too much here in the United States. Anyway, I know Canada, you guys are kind of leaps and bounds with your making everything legal up there versus here down the States. But what made that switch for you?
I guess it was kind of many different factors. I guess one factor is I was just getting a little bit bored, to be honest, about working in the sports supplement industry. And as I got older and started to evolve and grow as a person, those things became less important to me. And I wanted to evolve as a person, and that meant evolving with the business and stuff as well. Mm-hmm. So I really was kind of getting bored, and I wanted to get into, different things. But really it came down to a few personal reasons. And yeah, I was going through a lot of personal stuff, and I was drinking a lot of alcohol, and I guess you could say I was pretty much an alcoholic. And I got to the point where I realized that I was either gonna go one way or go the other way. And so I quit drinking, and that was about 2 or 3 years ago now. I think 3 years ago now. And I quit drinking cold turkey, and I really wanted to focus on, I really wanted to figure out if there was some alternative medicines out there that could help me overcome this addiction, and what was the real problem of that addiction too. So I started to really dig into that. And that's what kind of led me into CBD and cannabis. Mm-hmm. I've been using cannabis and stuff for, 20 years to help with pain and anxiety and all those kind of things. But then when I quit drinking, I started to look at CBD, and I saw a few studies on CBD that showed that it could help reduce cues to want to, drink or do drugs or things like that. So that kind of led me into the whole alternative medicine world, and that evolved into the psychedelic world and really into the mushroom area. And I started to really understand how beneficial mushrooms and psychedelics could be on mental health, and especially addiction, and how they could really help people overcome that. And I wish that I had known these things 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 2 or 3 years ago. If I had known these things about psychedelics and how beneficial they were and how you could use them, I think a lot of my own personal challenges would have been a lot easier to kind of resolve. And now I'm like, wow, I need to get this information. I want to share this information and teach people and get it out there, because there's a lot of people in the world, especially, I mean, nowadays with mental health and wellness. And that's really my focus now is like yourself too, we were in the fitness industry and so focused on building our physical bodies. But in reality, the most important thing of our body is right up here. And that's the one thing that we kind of neglect the most. And it's the real pandemic, the real epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, is not the COVID, it's the mental health and wellness.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I really got into things. It was really a personal, personal journey and just the desire to learn new information that has been unavailable and that is now being exposed and that's coming out. It's just a really exciting time in the world.
It really is. And with all the new research that's coming out as well as of late, and there's a little bit more acceptance of it mainstream. We're seeing documentaries being put out on Netflix and stuff that are getting a little bit more popularity there. Do you feel that mainstream sources like that promoting psychedelics in any way is going to help turn more people on, or maybe it's going to turn more people off if it's not presented in the right way? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that there's going to be good companies and good people that present it to the world in a good professional way. Like there's the organization MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, which was founded by Rick Doblin in the U.S. And Rick Doblin is, he's a trailblazer. He's a real leader, and he's going to get MDMA legalized in the U.S. in 2022. I think it'll be 2022 probably. It will be legalized as a prescription medication for PTSD psychotherapy. So I think there's good people like that are going to expose that and bring that to market in a professional and under the pharmaceutical sort of system, and they're going to do it in a good way. But then there is also going to be, I'm sure there's going to be pharmaceutical companies, your typical ones that are just out there for money and don't care about human health or anything. And there's going to be companies like that are going to try to get into the industry. So I think there's always going to be the good and bad, but I think the people are being exposed to it, and there's positive research studies, there's positive results that are coming out. So I think that's only going to help. It's just going to be a matter of, finding those right resources and finding the right good people. And there are a lot of great, especially in the U.S. right now. I've been connected through a network of clinicians, doctors, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, through an organization in New York. And there's all across the U.S., there's so many professional medical people that are promoting psychedelic use and integrating it in their psychotherapy and their counseling and all that kind of stuff. So I really do see people, opening up to this, because why not? Like, what's the alternative? Are you going to take prescription drugs that don't work and that had negative side effects? I mean, that's really the only alternative. There are a lot of other great alternatives like meditation, sound healing, all those kind of things work in conjunction with psychedelics. And I think psychedelics are just one aspect but they're a proven tool that can be used to support mental health. So I think people are going to, over time, it's just going to be more and more people are going to be becoming open to these types of therapy, because it's not really a drug. I mean, everything's a drug, really, if you think about it. Like, I mean, the most harmful drugs are in our grocery stores. If you go down aisles, like sugar, and all those chemicals, I mean, we're being exposed to those types of drugs. I don't even look at psychedelics or mushrooms really as a drug, because they're really an alternative medicine. They're really a tool to help people become healthier and to help people heal. So I think as people become more open to natural medicines and look for alternatives, people are definitely going to start using it because it works. And the stuff that doctors are prescribing, medical doctors, they just don't work. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, no, they don't work. And it keeps you in that perpetual hamster wheel of of pain and pain and
Yeah.
prescriptions, pain and prescriptions, then another prescription to help that other pain from that first prescription, and so on and so on.
Exactly. I mean, there is a time and a place for certain, pharmaceutical drugs.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Yeah.
I can't think of a situation off the top of my head.
There's one out there.
But, if you're in
Yeah.
a car crash and this happens and whatever,
Yeah.
there are situations and there are great doctors that integrate, the traditional, system with different alternative medicines. So there's a whole wide range of options out there for people now, and I think that's the most important thing is there are more options. You don't just have to go to your medical doctor and basically get 90% of the time you're getting horrible advice, or you're just not getting service, or you're not getting any care at all. There's so many more options for people now, and especially with the online world. I mean, a lot of people look at the online world in a negative way, and I do myself too sometimes because it disconnects people, but it also connects people. If you use the online world and social media in a positive way, which I'm trying to do now and trying to get more into that, in connecting with people and giving them resources so they have alternative options and they don't have to, just go with the status quo, or they just don't have to suffer anymore.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things. I think a lot of people are just suffering right now in pain, physical pain and mental pain, and there's a lot of options to heal that.
Yeah, and that's something too, like there's so much to touch on here from what you just finished saying that we could go off in any sort of which direction, but well, back to earlier we were saying, the mind, what we were talking about before. And what I think is really interesting is that people's perspective of psychedelics right now, because of so much, past propaganda of what they would do to your brain, and then hearing how good they are. And I've heard even, Gary Vee saying like, well, I don't want to meditate because like I'm good here. Like I don't really want to mess what's going on in my mind right now. But so many people are afraid to get deep into their mind. They feel that they can't quiet their mind. They don't want to try. It's hard. And I find it so interesting that psychedelics in a way can bring down all those walls.
Yeah, they definitely can. And I think people that are resistant to that, that's a natural resistance. I think even myself, I probably would have been resistant to that at a certain point in my life, without understanding the way they work and why you're resistant to that, because you want to break that down, those barriers. You want to go inside and become one with yourself and become happy and peaceful, and all that great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what psychedelics help people do. And I think that's a scary thing for some people to break down those barriers, because we've spent our whole lives building up these barriers, building up this physical presence and presenting this to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is really just some physical being and this physical bullshit that we're presenting to the world.
Yeah.
We can make up anything we want, but to really get deep inside and become who, and really love yourself and become at peace and happy with yourself, I think that takes a lot of work because of the world we're in and because what we need to build up. As a child, you start building up these defense mechanisms over time. Even if you're brought up in a great, when I was brought up by the most amazing parents in the world, most amazing childhood and everything. And for whatever reasons or whatever situations you encounter, you build up these barriers, you build up this resistance. And it's just natural in the world we live in to do that. So, I mean, the psychedelics, they can instantly break that down and allow you to start to grow and evolve and as a person.
Yeah, it's essentially that what they talk about, even with that ego death, that psilocybin can so naturally bring about for people that are ready and embrace it. Do you have any experience, like, talking to other people that have used psychedelics, or their own, or maybe your own, in a sense, like ego being dissolved with the use of psychedelics, that you can speak about, that you can reference?
Yeah, I mean, myself, I've had a lot. I've had such great experience with psychedelics, like especially over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
I've experimented with microdosing. I've experimented with, psychedelics, all different types, just to educate myself and to understand how they work in that. So I've experimented with different, microdosing and this and that. And I've also done a couple spiritual journeys myself of various dosages over the past like 6 months, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And just the benefits. And I went into them with an intention. So, I went into them with an intention of figuring out some problems, solving things, getting a better perspective on things, just elevating my awareness in general, just becoming a better person and a better, well-rounded human being, essentially. In terms of like the ego death and that, I don't think I have completely experienced full ego death. I know I haven't yet to this point, and that's something that I will get to for sure. But I definitely have spoken to many and like many different people that have experienced that, and many real professionals too. I'm part of a bunch of different psychedelic meetup groups here in like Canada and Toronto and in Vancouver and in Toronto, and everyone that's a part of these groups, there's a lot of professionals there that are very highly educated people and that are very successful in the world. And they've experienced this ego death, and they attribute it to being one of the top experiences or the most influential or most impactful experiences of their life. And I can definitely say that too. When I ate or drank 5-6 grams of mushrooms, that experience for me, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. And it's going to have an impact on the rest of my life now in a positive way. Yeah. And it's not like I want to go and do, that was several months ago. I can't even remember how long, maybe back in January when that was. And I haven't consumed that much or done a spiritual journey like that since then. I haven't even had the desire to necessarily, because I'm still integrating all of the learnings from that time into my everyday life, to establish, because that's the thing. I mean, you can take the psychedelics and you'll have the most amazing experience ever, many different ways. But then when you come back to your everyday life, I think it's important for people to really understand that they have to integrate those learnings into, as you know yourself, I mean, you have to integrate those learnings into your life, or you're kind of wasting a bit of the experience. You're still going to get benefit. You could do no integration, no preparation, nothing at all. Just by simply taking the psychedelic and having that experience, you will get benefits from that. You're going to become more grounded. You're going to become more in touch with nature. You're going to become more conscious. You're going to elevate your awareness. But you can make so much more progress, and you can accomplish so many more things, by integrating those learnings into your everyday life through different techniques with meditation, just anything, counseling, coaching, sound therapy. There's so many different techniques that you could, use in conjunction with that. And I think that's really important for people to understand.
Yeah. The integration part is so big, and like you said, and taking that time to honor that integration as well. Personally for myself, like I always found like journaling like a really good, a really good way to help with integrating as well, talking about the feelings, getting that out, and then that way in a way like your words become law almost, in that sense. You're putting pen to paper. You're creating that, so then it gets better integrated into your everyday. And it's funny, like with like the integration process and doing, and like you said, you did your 5-6 grams. What is that like called? Like a hero's? Was that like the hero's dose or something?
It's nothing compared to Paul Stamets. So 25 grams.
Woo! Yeah, and like you said, you did one and you're good. You don't need to go back. I mean, you've done it, and it's that same feeling that I had when I did ayahuasca. You did the one, but with us we did like 4, and it was, you had the whole day to try to integrate, and already before you knew it, you're going back for another one. So it'd be the same thing with like mushrooms, where you take the 5-6, then the next year you're like, oh, I'm going for another one, but I don't really feel like I need another one.
Yeah,
just yet.
That's the one cool thing about psychedelics too, is psychedelics do not have addictive properties to them. Like they're non-addictive, and that's a scientific fact. And that's the one thing that really it just blows my mind. Just because, I mean, almost there's so many, most other drugs are drugs have such addictive properties. Cocaine, heroin, meth, all those things are highly addictive. And they're bad for you. Psychedelics are non-addictive, and that's why, like, if you do a hero dose, you definitely have no desire whatsoever to do more drugs the next day, more psychedelics the next day, because you wake up and you feel great, you feel completely content, and you have no desire to consume more. And I think that's something that's really special about these psychedelics and these alternative plant medicines, mushroom medicines. And I think that's why they were shaped that way in nature. Because it's a built-in self-defense mechanism, the way I look at it. So
no, totally. That's their own little self-defense mechanism indeed, and it sure gives us a good time. But out of all the psychedelics, like with like mushrooms and stuff, there's like 200 species or something of all these psychedelics, psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, which are really starting to gain more popularity, starting to gain and what other states are starting to go for decriminalization right now. What can people expect, like, out of so many different types of mushrooms? Is like, how do they all vary?
So I've been digging deep into this over the last several months, especially up here in Vancouver, BC, where the mushroom industry is just a booming industry. There's, many different growers and cultivators and stuff up here, and they're all coming out with, there's a lot of new strains, and they're not even new. They're not new strains. They're just different variants. And the word strain is actually misused in the mushroom, in the psychedelic mushroom industry, because most of the strains are Psilocybe cubensis, cubes, or cubensis. Most strains are cubensis, and then there's different varieties of the cubensis. So you'll have like Amazonian, Golden Teacher. The list goes on. The list just goes on and on. There's so many different Huatla. Big Mexicans. It just goes on forever. The variance between different ones, it's a bit subjective, and it's hard to really say, because I always explain this to people, that I go, you really have to, if you're going to do mushrooms, really base it on get a quality mushroom, like from a quality source. And generally, if it's a cubensis mushroom, it's going to have about 1% psilocybin in it, and that's what's going to give you the true psychedelic effect. Obviously, each mushroom and each variant of the mushroom has different chemical properties slightly, but once you're taking 5 grams, 6 grams in that dosage range, you're getting such a high level of psilocybin that you're going to trip out. You're going to experience those hallucinogenic effects no matter what. And once you get to that state, it's really hard to say, because everyone's going to have a completely unique and different experience on the exact same, mushroom. Like, if I take the same one that you take, we could have a totally different experience depending on what we go into it, like what our intention is going into it, and depending on our mood and all million different things. So I don't think it's as important what type or what variety of mushroom per se, that you're going to use and this and that. It's fun to try different ones and, just like anything, but I don't think it's that critical. There are a few mushrooms, I should note, that do have an extremely high psilocybin content compared to the average ones. And those are, so out of the cubensis strain, there's Penis Envy, and that has generally, and it looks like a little penis. And that variety generally has double the psilocybin content of a regular cubensis. So like a golden teacher, an African transky, generally has double. So people need to be aware of that, because if they're like eating a mushroom and they think it's, you know, a regular cubensis and it's a penis envy, they're going to be taking double dose.
Yeah.
And then there's another type of mushroom called blue meanies, which are pretty popular, and those are even more potent than penis envy on average.
Mm-hmm.
So those are another one that kind of people have to be aware of. And those are pretty much the ones that are generally available. Amanita Mascara is that popular, famous mushroom, the red one with the white dots on it.
Oh, yeah.
And that has psychedelic properties. It's completely different. I haven't studied that one too much, but that one can have a lot of like negatives. It can have some negative side effects if it's not prepared properly and taken properly and whatnot. So I wouldn't recommend people, you know, unless you're highly experienced, I wouldn't recommend that people go into that one. But yeah, that's generally, I mean, there's a lot of variants, but again, it comes down to the quality source and where you're getting it from, how it's, you know, cultivated and whatnot.
Yeah. So that's with like all the doses and everything. So we know that, you know, obviously it's great for the mind, opening up your mind, the ego, the death. Are there any other benefits of it that, you know, integrating psychedelics, like for, you know, other diseases or anything like that that's coming up in latest research, or anything that's kind of cool on the forefront that people are discovering now?
I think the main things, I mean, the really cool stuff that I'm kind of drawn to is a lot of the addiction stuff. So all types of addiction. I mean, it's like they've been studying alcohol primarily, and there's been studies already done on that. I mean, it's been MDMA and psilocybin can really help with, you know, any type of addiction. So that's like, that area is going to evolve, and I think that's going to help a lot of people. I mean, even with opioids, like if people are, I mean, there's an epidemic, I mean, a pandemic, whatever you want to call it, in Vancouver right now that the government and the health authorities are not solving. And people are dying every day on overdose of opioids, and they're not doing anything about it. But psychedelics are one thing that could help address that. There's a lot of new stuff coming out on cluster headaches too, and headaches, and how psilocybin and psychedelics could help with that. And that's pretty exciting too, because I don't experience like cluster headaches or migraines or things like that, but I know people that do, and it basically debilitates them.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting area. Another exciting area that I've been reading about, which there's no studies on it, but I've just been reading some anecdotal reports and through talking with people. But a lot of business people have been using psychedelics for, you know, several years, especially in Northern California, in the Silicon Valley and stuff there. They've been using psychedelics for years to help with programming, to help with creativity. I mean, Steve Jobs, I mean, how do you think he came up with the iPhone? Like in all seriousness, I mean, really, like how did you really come up with this idea?
Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing to thank, and it's LSD.
Yeah. You know, and that's one thing I'm glad you bring that up, because I have this theory in my head, and I've said it to a couple people, and I don't know I feel like maybe this is something to ask his kids and everything, because, you know, he also didn't allow his kids to use you know, iPhones either themselves. They limited their cell phone use, and we're talking about social media earlier, and we're talking, you know, Bill Gates too. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs both didn't let their kids use their, you know, cell phones or iPhones and everything else like that, in the way that obviously a lot of us do today. I don't have any kids, but there's a lot of people that, you know, obviously kids are using them. And Steve Jobs, you know, famously did psychedelics. I was always kind of in my head thinking, like, did he maybe have like an epiphany and saw where things were going, that, you know, he did, you know, he had cancer. So it's like, did something manifest in him that he saw? I don't know. It was just kind of a wild idea in my head, but I was like, you know, he didn't know, you know, he didn't want his kids using the phones. He used psychedelics. You know, was he battling with something that he knew the way the future was going to go here today and where we are now today with everything going on? that he had some regret for following through with that. It's something that I've always thought about with using psychedelics myself and realizing some things and going, oh shit.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I didn't know that Steve Jobs didn't kind of deterred his kids from staying away from cell phone. But that makes total sense now, because he knew that cell phones are not good for you. They're not. I mean, there's no one on the planet can say a cell phone is good for you. It compromises human health.
Mm-hmm.
You can argue to what degree it compromises human health, but us just having our cell phone, just having this right here, having it in my pocket every day, where I'm compromising my health to a certain degree, and everybody is.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that Steve Jobs knew that. I believe he knew that. There's no question. I'm sure he had. I'm sure he was battling internally. He had some battles with himself, because he was a great entrepreneur, a great, businessman, great ideas, and came up with all this stuff and wanted to bring that to life. But at the same time too, he probably realized along his journey that, he was building this cool and most great thing, but at the same time, that's not necessarily the greatest thing for the world, the way it evolved. And maybe he saw that. I mean, I believe that. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he had a lot of great visions and insights, especially as he got in his older years. I just wish Bill Gates would.
That's a whole other podcast episode, Don.
Well, that guy. The fact that you brought him up, though, just gives me an opportunity to rip on him, though.
Okay, well, we can rip on him. Let's go. Say what you need to say. But yeah, no, I mean, that's.
Bill Gates needs he needs to take some serious psychedelics.
Yeah, no, he does.
Just become a better person.
Yeah, and it's at the point too where it's you're saying again, good people in the industry, bad people in the industry, and this is one person that maybe should have just stuck to making shitty computers. I don't know, that always got viruses.
Yeah, exactly.
But back to psychedelics, and we're talking about obviously the dose range. We mentioned the Hero's Dose, the Stamets dose, and what's popular now, and what I've been doing now. Obviously, your research and everything was a spearhead in that. And looking into myself, because I've used psychedelics myself. My first experience was when I was 15 years old using mushrooms. I've got that on record now. Mom, Dad, I'm sure they know. But what I've been using now for myself, I've noticed, and I'm a bit of a self healer, and I started using it for my PMDD. I believe it's called the right thing. So it's basically a stronger, more badder version of PMS that they can't really put their finger on, but it basically flips your world upside down. And I've been using that now to try to see if that's going to help it. And I have noticed a complete night and day difference. And it's been for the because of microdosing, which is now really, really popular. Microdosing mushrooms, and that's probably what you're just mentioning too, that a lot of these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and everything that have been using for a while. So with microdosing, where do you see is that the future?
I think, that's definitely, it's most acceptable to people. Even just talking with people, and I grew up in Ontario, and now I live in BC. Out here, people are open to anything out here. People just live more freely, kind of like California too, Southern Cal. People just do their own thing, live off the land and smoke weed and eat mushrooms. So not all the time, but most of the time. But in Toronto and out east, people there are a bit conservative. They're a bit uptight. They're a bit, and that's where I grew up. And they're just a bit more closed-minded. But even out there, I'm talking to people about psychedelics and microdosing and all that, and everyone's open to it. Everyone's interested in it, and they're all open to it. Even my dad, I got my dad microdosing. He doesn't even need it. He's 70 years old. He doesn't need it all. He's super sharp still. But I got him microdosing just, for fun and just to see, just
Yeah.
almost as like a human experiment. And like it basically elevates him. He's like on point. Like it's like he has the mind of a 30-year-old now. It's like it's pretty amazing. And then just just anyone, just regular people that would never even think about consuming any types of drugs. They're all open to microdosing when they understand that there are benefits to it and what the benefits could be. Very open to it. And I think it just introduces people to mushrooms and psychedelics in such a light way that it's definitely going to open things up to people and to the masses. But at the same time, I think people should really consider the mega doses. That's where I truly believe to get the most life-changing, like real benefits of psychedelics, I think you do need to experiment or not. You really do need to try those hero doses in the appropriate setting, in the appropriate environment, with the appropriate advice and guidance and all that kind of stuff, of course. But to get those life-changing, experiences, you do need the hero doses. But the microdosing is like, it's amazing as an antidepressant too. It's amazing for, day-to-day, various different things, for mood elevation, all that kind of stuff, even just for mental focus, for cognition.
Creativity.
Creativity and just anti-aging of the brain too, especially for older people. Everybody's going to get dementia one day. Everybody's going to get dementia. Everybody's going to get some form of, Alzheimer's, this, that, and the other. But we can start, preventing that already by rehabilitating our brains and by developing those, helping regrow and regenerate those neurons in the brain. And that's what microdosing can definitely do.
Yeah, and that's saying like with your dad, like being that he's 70, I believe you said too, like with the neuroplasticity, of potential of using mushrooms for this and to keep your mind sharp and young and healthy. Now for people that want to try it, they should be aware though there are like some drugs though that they should probably stay away from when they're using, right? I believe you're not supposed to mix certain things.
Generally most stuff is actually okay. I shouldn't say that, but but that's the truth. But no, definitely be cautious. One drug that is definitely be cautious about, and I've heard this from multiple sources and stuff, and I've looked into it myself, is tramadol. It's a painkiller, I believe.
Okay.
Tramadol. It's a painkiller. Some doctors prescribe it off-label for other stuff, but that one is one to be cautious of. It's not a drug you want to be on. So if you're on it, try get off it or just wean off it or whatever. So that's one. Any SSRIs, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, any serotonin drugs, those could have a compounding effect. But again, that's just being very cautious. You can definitely still be on serotonin based drugs and still microdose mushrooms. Yeah. I would just suggest that you would not take your serotonin drug or your SSRI on the day that you're going to do your microdose. Or if you are going to do your SSRI, you would want to take it maybe 4 to 6 hours apart. But then the challenge becomes one of those might keep you up at night and you might not get a good sleep. So that's why I found people, and I've been advising people on this. And since I'm not a medical doctor, I can give people advice, which is an advantage I learned. So just not to go on a side note, but something I learned with all these doctors and psychiatrists that I've been networking and working with. They said I have a huge advantage by not being a medical doctor and not being a certified psychiatrist or anything like that. They said that I can give advice, and that I can give advice that they cannot give. And so all those professional doctors and stuff, they're all very supportive of underground therapists and underground advisors, the good ones, because we're providing education in something that they cannot legally provide. So I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what the original question was.
That's all right. Well, we went off on a whole. That was a lot of information. So we're all right. What the original question was, I'm sure they got it there. And with because it was kind of like with microdosing and everything, and the neuroplasticity of the brain. And what's cool now too, that there are actually there's some really, I've been hearing, and I mean I've known and heard of it anyway myself, with hippie flipping, which I think is the term, mixing MDMA and mushrooms together. And that's kind of one of those new things that we're researching right now and trying to like learn the effects of it. So what's actually going on in the brain? Can you explain that to people? Like when mushrooms hit the brain, or when MDMA hits the brain, like what's going on, like for like our scientific like geeks out there that like hearing like that kind of info?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because the flipping thing, like hippie flipping or whatever, I'm just going to grab a book.
Yeah.
There's a doctor, or sorry, a psychiatrist, that I've had the opportunity to do a couple Zooms with and conferences, speaking conferences. And his name's Bruce Sanguin. And his book is called Dismantled, and the subtitle is How Love and Psychedelics Broke a Clergyman Apart and Put Him Back Together. So to make a long story short, he basically used MDMA and psilocybin to overcome his own personal challenges, and he explained everything in great detail, which was really cool. But essentially, like from a kind of scientific standpoint, how they work and how they're different is psilocybin is like your classic psychedelic. So you're gonna, it's gonna bind with that serotonin receptor, and you're gonna get hallucinogenic effects, and it's going to work in that way. Whereas MDMA is more of an entactogen, it's actually an empathogen and an entactogen. So that delivers more feelings of oneness, more feelings of empathy and openness. So the difference is, like, MDMA kind of breaks down those barriers. And it opens you up to talking about things and bringing things out that you normally wouldn't bring out because you're too scared. It really breaks down that fear, brings down the fear, and allows you to open up and talk about things. And that combined with the traditional psychedelic, that combined effect, it's unbelievable. It has a combination of opening things up, but also increasing the creativity and whatnot in the brain. So it's a pretty unique effect, and that's still being. I mean, there haven't been any studies that have actually looked at that combination yet.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely going to be on the forefront in the future, because there's a lot of guys like. There's another doctor, Dr. Ben Sessa in the UK, and he's been using MDMA therapy, MDMA assisted psychotherapy for years now, and he combines it with, he uses psilocybin too. Yeah. Not sure if he uses them both at the same time, but I know that's something that he would definitely. He's probably going to be studying in the future. So, yeah, there is a bit of a difference between the two. And like MDMA is not a traditional psychedelic. It really isn't. It's more of like an empathogen, entactogen. So it has like mild psychedelic properties, but it's more, it's not. It's more of a, it's more of an empathogen, and it also is a stimulant too. The amphetamine part of it. So, the other cool thing about MDMA. Versus other things, because there's a lot of other drugs too that are being used now, and they're called dissociative drugs, so like ketamine. Okay. And that's actually very popular in the US right now. People are doing ketamine therapy for depression and anxiety and all that kind of stuff, and PTSD. And ketamine is more of a dissociative, and that has different effects. The benefit of MDMA, I believe, over something like ketamine is when you do MDMA, you remember everything. your memory is spot on.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do MDMA and you have a psychotherapy session, the next day and right after, you're going to remember everything. You remember everything you talked about in detail. There's no memory loss whatsoever.
Yeah.
Whereas with ketamine, things can get a little
blurry.
Blurry. Yeah, exactly. You feel like you're walking out. I mean, me personally, I've only done ketamine a few times in my life, just experimenting with it to see what it was all about. But yeah, there's definitely different effects there, and that's like the one benefit of the MDMA is you can remember everything. And then with you have a classic psychedelic, there's some stuff that you might not necessarily remember when you go on that big psychedelic journey. Yeah. So that's why when you combine both of them at a slightly lower dose of the psychedelic, and then you have the MDMA in there, it's a really unique effect. Yeah. It's really perfect for doing psychotherapy when you're on it.
Nice.
Because of the effects. Like, you have the benefits of the psychedelic, and then you have the benefits of the MDMA open you up, breaking down those barriers, and the retention of the memory and everything as well.
Yeah, that's something that almost reminds me of, like with like CBD, and you hear obviously like with like being a CBD professional that you are, you hear like the entourage effect, right? When you start like layering more and more of it, right? So is that kind of like the same thing? Am I kind of like close to that?
Definitely, you're just combining two different compounds and getting the benefits of one, the benefits of the other, and they work very well together. I mean, I don't think I've actually ever taken both together. Maybe I have,
but there's always a first.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like from a recreational standpoint, I mean, there's nothing better than MDMA, pure, clean MDMA.
Nope.
There's nothing better. So I can imagine combining the two at a lower dose. Would
yeah, that'd be pretty good. And you mentioned the ketamine too. It was something that like I experimented with like way back, and it wasn't a lot, but it was always just I always heard around that, and I want to know what that was too. And I haven't ever really looked at it with like the whole K hole. People talking about a K hole or the ketamine hole. Like what is that?
So ketamine, a K hole is basically when you're taking. You've taken way too much.
Okay, that's what that is then. Okay.
So it recreationally. So I mean, I've seen people who've taken too much ketamine in nightclubs. Mm-hmm. Back in Toronto, back in the day, there was a place called the Comfort Zone, which I think is still around, which is super famous. But they had a room there, and it was called the K-hole room. And back then, I didn't really know what it was, but I knew that was like for people that were basically overdosing on ketamine. And I knew that I did not want to overdose on ketamine, based on what I was seeing. So that's why I never tried ketamine.
Yeah.
But yeah, going into a K-hole, it's basically you're just taking way too much ketamine, and you're just boom, you're just done. You're just literally going to pass out. You're going to, it's not a good thing. But I mean, used appropriately, it can definitely have benefits. I mean, if like ketamine is regularly used in emergency rooms, I don't know if you knew that, but like across the U.S. and in Canada too, ketamine is used in emergency rooms. So if somebody comes into an emergency room and is suicidal and is going to kill themselves, if you instantly inject ketamine into them, they'll be non-suicidal, like instantly. Yeah, wow. Instantly. The effects will last. The effects will last to a different degree depending on the person, but it could last people. It could last, and these are like, I mean, I'm talking about severe, like people that are really truly have psychological, serious mental illness, and they're coming in. They are literally going to kill themselves. These people, and they take them. They hook them up to an IV, inject them with ketamine, and instantly everything is resolved. They're no longer suicidal, and that'll last anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how much they're given. But again, it's another form of treatment that's not being used enough with certain populations. I mean, like, again, it's just like comes down to government and their policies and all that stuff. But ketamine, when used appropriately, it could be saving so many people's lives, just the psychedelics and stuff too. It's just a shame that it hasn't been already. It should have already been. All of this stuff should already be fully legalized, like and we wouldn't have this mental health, this mental health chaos in the world right now. But that's part of the whole kind of, in the grand scheme of things, the powers that be, government, the deep state, whatever. The people that think they're controlling the world, they don't want people to have an open mind. They don't want people to elevate consciousness. They don't want to become smarter. They don't want people to think for themselves. And that's what psychedelics do. Like psychedelics make, they make people better. Generally speaking, psychedelics make people better people. They make people more empathetic. They make people more caring. They make people care about nature. They make people connect with nature more. There's so many positive benefits of psychedelics. And you mentioned that the first time that you tried psychedelics was when you were 15 years old. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing. Like I have a 9-year-old son now, and I'm about to have a daughter, and I'm going to educate them on cannabis, mushrooms, psychedelics, all this kind of stuff. And I've spoken to doctors and even this psychiatrist that I was telling you about. Somebody asked him when we were having our Zoom conferences, and somebody said, at what age would you, if you had kids, what age do you think it's appropriate for teenagers? Do you think it's appropriate for teenagers to experiment with psychedelics or try them in a controlled, setting? And he said, yes, absolutely. He goes, there's nothing wrong with a 15 or 16-year-old experimenting with psychedelics. And he sees there's no negative effect, only positive effects could come with that in the appropriate setting with the appropriate people, with the appropriate guidance. And he also said, somebody followed up that question and said, what about a parent and a child doing a psychedelic journey together? And again, I've heard this from many doctors, many researchers, many therapists, and the consensus was all of them said under the appropriate circumstances, setting, and all that kind of stuff, that's a great thing. That could definitely be a great thing. And I've talked about this to many people, and I believe like psychedelics should, like especially mushrooms should be, readily available for everyone. Mm-hmm. Anybody. I can go right now. I can just go up the street, go up into the forest, and I can pick psychedelic mushrooms and go up there, grab them, and eat them. Yeah. And that's like legal. So like, why can't it should be that way, because it, like, if kids and young, I'm not saying, probably get myself in trouble here, but I'm not saying that kids should, have all these things. But if these things were available, mm-hmm. then I would much rather have, kids and teenagers going and taking some mushrooms and eating those and using those recreationally, as opposed to experimenting with cocaine, heroin, or just even any other drug.
Alcohol.
Alcohol. I mean, alcohol is the worst of all the drugs, in my mm-hmm. opinion. But I mean, you could argue like alcohol, I think alcohol, heroin, and cocaine, and meth and whatever. But alcohol and those drugs, they're the absolute worst. And mm-hmm. that's the first thing that kids are exposed to when they're young, is usually it's alcohol. Yeah. And that's the worst of all of them. I'd much rather, have kids and be exposed to other things, or at least be educated. We should at least be educating. I think that's the most important thing, is educating kids. And my background is teaching, and I'm still a certified school teacher with the Ontario School Board. I truly believe that like school boards should be teaching about these things. And that's one of the reasons why I would not be able to go into a classroom. Like I would not be able to be a teacher nowadays, and just with the knowledge and everything I have, because I wouldn't be able to follow the curriculum anymore. I mean, I would just be going off on my own curriculum and teaching about
Yeah.
real world stuff and what is really what people really need and what's important and all that. And it's not necessarily the curriculum.
Yeah, no, it's just, you're gonna learn how to meditate, you're gonna learn about psychedelic drugs, you're gonna learn how to finance,
Yeah.
you can grow a garden, all those.
Probably lose my teaching license in
Yeah.
about 5 minutes, but
Well, maybe they should start making alternative schools for children then too to attend.
yeah, I mean, I think that's.
I don't know. Is that a thing? Is that out there? I don't
think
know.
that's a way. I think that's something of the future. I mean, when this whole COVID thing happened, I was like, because I was like, basically, I had to teach my son, like trying to teach him at home and work and stuff at the same time, and I had this idea. I was like, oh man, I'm like, why don't I? It was like actually more of a business idea, but I was wondering, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are all the other parents doing that have to like go to like office jobs or like, do like jobs that they can't work from home? So I was like, oh man, I'm like, I should like start up a new wilderness because I live in the forest here.
Yeah.
So I was like, I should start like this wilderness educational teaching program. And then I'll just like recruit all the kids that can't go to school now, and then you can just come over and then take them to the woods and teach them about like everything that's in the woods, like about all the different plants, all the different mushrooms, how they coexist, about the environment, weather, all that. Like there's so many things you could teach there. And then I realized I'm like, oh crap, I'm not allowed to have like groups and stuff. So,
yeah,
that's not gonna work. But I ended up doing that with my son, and I took him through there, and he learned so much stuff about nature and mushrooms, plants, all the harmony that happens in nature. And he wouldn't have learned that if this COVID stuff never happened. And now he's really excited about going on these hikes, and he's excited about nature and learning about plants and animals. And I think that's a really good thing, a positive thing, at least for me, that's come out of all this.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's such a I never even thought that, like the whole child aspect of children, trying or taking psilocybin as well, and that's something really interesting because the human brain doesn't, like, their brain is still developing by what, 25 it finishes developing around there, so their brain is still growing and stuff. They have this chance to have the medicine actively in their brain. Like, what is that going to do for new firing and wiring? Like, it's getting me excited just thinking about the potential and possibility of that, of having such a young, pliable mind and be exposed to something like that.
Yeah, I know, and I have two examples of, Paul Stamets, the famous mycologist. So he did, he ate something like 25 to 30 grams of mushrooms was his first psychedelic trip, which is an insane, like crazy amount. And he did that when he was really young. I can't remember if he was either like, I don't know, he was either 17 to like 21 years old. He was somewhere in that age range. I can't remember, but he did that when he was that young.
Oh,
and if you talk to Paul Stamets or hear him speak now, like he's just next level. Like he's so brilliant. It's hard to, he's brilliant. He's at another level. And I think he can attribute a part of that to that experience. I also met another gentleman from Vancouver, and I was talking to him, just networking. Like I just got connected to him through a friend, and because my friend knew that I was into psychedelics and mushrooms and all that, he's like, "Oh, you should connect with my buddy. He's a high executive of one of these trading companies and all that. He's really super successful." And so I met up with him, and he was just and I didn't really want to meet with him at first because like all those business suit lawyers, public company kind of people, I don't really jive with them too well. We just don't jive that. I mean, they're just not my crew. But then again, I'm very open-minded and always willing to meet anybody. So I did go and meet this guy. He's one of the, he's your typical public company, big time suit guy. But there's something a lot different about him when I was talking to him. I'm like, this guy's cool. Like, he's just down to earth. Like, no no ego. That was the big difference. Like, he was so successful too. Like, I mean, very successful, like from a business and financial standpoint and all that kind of stuff. Like, he had all the reasons to have a huge ego, but he had no ego at all. I'm like, this is weird. So I'm like talking to him, and he's like really interested in what I'm doing and all this kind of stuff. And then as we're talking, he's like, yeah. So like, I'll tell you about my experience with mushrooms. And he's like, it all started when I was 15 years old. And he's like, yeah, I was 15. And he's like, I wanted to try them, and I just didn't know. So I was like, I got a bag. And he's like, I had this bag, and he goes, apparently there was like 15 grams in the bag. And he goes, I just didn't know. Like, I thought you were supposed to eat the whole bag. So he ate the whole bag, 15 grams, when he's like 15 years old. Yeah. And, said it was the wildest experience of his life. And still to this day, he still says that had like a major influence on his life. And just seeing how he was, at this day and age, like about 20 years later, it definitely had an impact on his life, because he was an anomaly out of all those suits in that thing, in that area of business and stuff. He was so different. He was so different from everybody else that I've ever met in that sort of area. And I definitely attribute it. I mean, he even attributed it to his use of psychedelics and that positive effect that it had on his life and personality and state of consciousness, really.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, I definitely didn't have 15 grams when I was 15 years old. I'm not even sure how much I actually had. It was just, I was with some friends, and I was out, and I was 15. It was like one of the last years before I graduated. I had them, I ate them. And I was like, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to ask my mom if I can stay out longer, and I'll ask her, and I'll be polite and stuff. And she's like, nope, you got to come home. And I was like, but I really can't come home. So I came home, and my parents' house, it's kind of like a log house, and I had all the wood everywhere. And I remember being in our bathroom, and it started to kick in, and the walls started doing their thing, and then my dad's knocking on the door, and like, oh shit. So I went downstairs into my bedroom. It was late at night already, and I basically just like tripped for the evening in my bedroom by myself. And it was definitely an interesting experience for sure. And I definitely, back then, I was kind of almost like, before all this new information cracked out, I would say almost maybe even in my early, like late 20s and stuff, I was kind of like ashamed. I was like, man, like I was trying drugs already at 15. Oh geez, Mindy, like what were you doing and stuff? And I always kind of gave myself shit for it. But now I'm like, you know what? Good on you for doing it. Yeah. I'm like, no, yeah.
David Wolf would have been proud of you.
Yeah. What are your, before, we've talked so much, and we've got so much out in the open here with psychedelics, and it's been great. And I still want to even talk about like LSD and everything, but I really want to know, where do you see the future of psychedelics in 5 years?
In 5 years, I really see there's going to be two streams, or two avenues, or two ways that the psychedelic sort of thing evolves. And I see one route as being your traditional, your more kind of your medical model, your clinical medical model that's going to be tied in with, pharmaceuticals, good and bad pharmaceutical stuff. So I see that model is going to, it's already skyrocketing and evolving in the U.S. especially, because down there you guys are about a year ahead of us at least, because everything we basically just copy from a drug and Health Canada and FDA standpoint. We just copy the FDA of A pretty much up here in Canada. We just look whatever the FDA does. I don't know if it's like a way to save money or something, but the FDA does, we'll just copy that and save money. And so I think it's going to evolve in the U.S. It's already evolving. I mean, I know so many people and companies that are being set up down there. And a lot of the real business aspect is going to be in the services that are associated with psychedelic use. So the counseling services, the integration services, the community hubs, the education, all that kind of stuff is really going to evolve, because the actual drug, the pharmaceutical aspect of it, that's not going to be a big business because you might only take it once or twice, and then all your problems are solved and you've healed yourself, so you're never going to use it again. So it's not a really great pharmaceutical drug model.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that there's going to be good companies that are going to set things up like Rick Doblin and MAPS. They're setting things up and doing things properly, and they're doing it for the good of humanity and all this kind of stuff. And then there's going to be the bad, your typical pharmaceutical companies. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to take molecules like LSD and drugs like LSD, which already work perfectly fine. I think they're going to take those molecules, manipulate them slightly, try and get a patent on it, and then prescribe it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, this is a medical doctor already. This is a medical doctor explained this to me up here in Canada, because he goes, LSD is already perfect the way it is. Like, LSD is perfect. He goes, the problem is, you can't patent it. So nobody's going to put the money into researching it anymore, because anybody can just buy it and sell it for cheap. Like, the pharmaceutical companies won't make money on it. So that's why he said that he thinks they're going to take it, put a little twist on it, and then what they do is they'll create a study and come up with a new indication for it, or a specific indication, and then they'll be able to get FDA approval on that, and then they can file a patent for it, and then they can sell it. So I think that's what they're going to do with LSD, which is kind of cheeky and kind of shisty,
It is pretty shisty.
Yeah, because they could just release LSD right now the way it is, and it's totally perfect. But LSD I think it'll be the most prescribed antidepressant drug, or it should be, in a few years.
Yeah.
Because like the antidepressants that are prescribed now, they just don't work.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I was going to mention when you mentioned kids too is like, kids are already I don't know if people are aware of this, but kids, like young children, are already being prescribed adult antidepressant drugs. This is a common thing. This is very common.
What?
And this is very common. This is more common than you think. So young children, like children of the ages of like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, are being prescribed antidepressant drugs that are meant for adults. And it's fucked. I mean, really, is what it is.
Oh my
so
gosh.
That's already happening. So, I mean, when you mentioned that this is what a doctor's mentioned. A medical doctor mentioned this to me and said, people are questioning whether teenagers or kids should be prescribed these things. He's like, I'm not saying they should, but he goes, look at what we're already prescribing kids. Look what we're already giving them. We're already putting them on these harmful drugs. So we should explore these alternatives, And I think that's an area hopefully that area will get researched. So I think there's going to be that stream will happen. But then I also feel there's going to also be an alternative medicine. There's going to be an underground, I guess you would call it underground. There's going to be a hippie culture to this whole psychedelic area, just like the cannabis world. Like, I see there's two streams. Like, I mean, in Canada, there's more the health and wellness market for cannabis, and then there's the recreational market. The recreational market, that's all done through the government. They do all the recreational stores. They sell whatever. Yeah. That's fine and dandy and all. But then there's still a whole other grassroots cannabis market in Canada that's geared towards health and wellness and the medicinal market, which the government of Canada has never addressed. They're servicing the recreational cannabis, industry, but they haven't done anything for health and wellness or medicinal, really. But again, it's just about making money for them.
Yeah. Why would they explore that further when they have their cash cow?
Exactly. So I see, and the thing is too with mushrooms is like mushrooms is a natural. It's a natural substance. I mean, anybody can grow them themselves. You can grow them yourself. It might not necessarily be easy to do yourself, but you can.
Yeah.
You can go pick them in the forest. It's accessible. So I think people I would always rather use a natural alternative medicine as opposed to using something pharmaceutical. And I think, there's more and more and more people in the world are waking up and realizing that the whole medical system and the whole pharmaceutical system in North America is just an absolute joke. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like if you're not waking up to that, like, I mean, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you got to wake up to this fact that the whole system is just a big joke, and it's all an attack on your health. It's not to help your health. And using these alternative medicines that they're trying to steer you away from, like anything that the government steers you away from, that's what I'm gravitating towards. Like, government said vitamin C is shit. You know, like, government, don't use vitamin C, don't use oil of oregano, they're shit. Okay, well, I'm going to look into that now. Like, that's the thing is, like, right now, the government's trying to, and even like, you know, Facebook and all those social media sites, they're suppressing, like, apparently if you post about vitamin C and the health benefits, it's blocked or shadowed immediately. And even if you do like a PubMed search, because I just, like, if you do a PubMed search on vitamin C and various viruses, they'll do a special block over that says, you know, get your information only from the government web. Like, they basically try to redirect you away from getting the information. So, but always, there's so many alternative medicines out there. And really, when it comes down to it, you know, everything is available in nature, right? Like, everything is here for us. Like, you know, we don't really need all these chemicals and all these other things. Like, everything that we need is available in nature. And I think there's a lot of people that are really starting to understand that and really starting to heal themselves. Like, that's the thing is, like, everybody can figure their stuff out for themselves now. Like, you don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to go to anybody, really. Like, I mean, that's what I tell people too. I'm like, you don't need my advice, like, necessarily. You don't need my help. I mean, I'm happy to guide you. Like, I'm happy to guide you, but I mean, anybody can self-heal with these medicines. Anybody can really fix themselves, you know. Obviously, guidance, education, all that stuff definitely helps and whatnot. But the whole point of these medicines and especially psychedelics is something that you can self-guide. You know, it's not something that you have to rely on somebody. You know, like, again, it's good to experiment with them, get experience, learn from other people, learn from experts, and that's what I've done myself. And use and, you know, get as much guidance as you need. But again, it's not something that is like, you know, you're not going to get hooked on this. It's not something you have to take every day. It's not something you ever have to take again, maybe even. Something that you can safely use on your own too, or use, you know, again with someone that's close to you or something like that.
Wow. Everything is at our fingertips, and we have to remember too that we are nature. We are nature. We are cells, and we are nature, just like the trees and the plants and the systems are all, you know, we all kind of look the same on the inside. You know, the tree of life, the embryo, everything. It's all these mirror images of us. And you mentioned, and this, gosh, really quick, Don. You mentioned them mutating or changing the LSD in order to patent it. I had seen an article, I don't know if you saw the same thing, because obviously you're in the community, about they were wanting to do the same thing, I think it was with mushrooms, so that you would never have a bad trip. Did you see that headline?
I think I saw something about that.
Is that along the same lines of like they want to mutate it and then maybe patent it? Is that something too that they're maybe thinking of doing?
That I could see them coming up with some scam. That sounds like a good scam to me. Like from a firm, like I'm sure I don't know. That sounds like a pharmaceutical company trying to put a spin on something. That doesn't. I don't know about that. I mean, like, you know what I mean? You're taking something that's already great, and then you're it's just like cannabis, right? Like, you're taking like I said, the government's already done this. They've taken cannabis, and then they've extracted THC, and they've extracted CBD, and completely isolated them, and then they made it into a prescription drug now in the U.S. But FDA has regulated that, and now, but then the studies show it's not as effective as cannabis in its whole. So it's just bizarre. So I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies will do that, but that's the pharmaceutical model. Isolate the single molecule, isolate it, and purify it, and then synthesize it, and then dose it to people repeatedly. And that's the model. So that's what they try. That's what they're doing with cannabis, and that's what they're going to try to do with these drugs. But again, you don't need like, I mean, again, mushrooms and all this stuff is going to be readily available to people. So,
yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, Don, I just want to thank you so much. We definitely could talk probably for another hour yet on all this with psychedelics. So there's so much to talk about. It's such an incredible, eye-opening topic. I'm obviously, big alternative medicine plant advocate. So right there with you. But really appreciate your time today. Is there anything that you wanna speak about here really quick, fast, or point anyone in the direction of as well? To that, if they want to learn more or connect with you, where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm just, I'm not the most active person on social media because it's funny because I always ask your advice on something. I'm just so busy. I'm so busy actually doing stuff that I don't have time to actually be on. I wish, but actually I am going to be working. I'm going to be getting a lot more content done. So people can find me on Instagram at Supplement Godfather, and yeah, you can find me on Facebook too through that, and I do have a TikTok account too, which is at Supplement Godfather, and I actually post like little just videos on there that are very informative, and then my Twitter is Mushroom Godfather. But yeah, you can find me on all those networks, and then I have a couple brands and companies that I do work for, and that I do all the products and stuff for. Pro Natural Plus, Limitless Mushrooms, which you are obviously well aware of, and Clinical Hemp Health, which is my cannabis brand that I've rolled out. And I'd love for people to connect with me. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Don.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and hopefully everybody got some good info from this.
I think they did. Thank you.